we're super excited to have Dorchester 2 and again, Susan Applin, the client success coach on our team that is working with them in the work there. And so Katie and Kenneth have been great friends of mine along the way. And so we're super excited to have you all here. And I'll turn it over to you, Susan.
Okay. Katie and Kenneth, long time no see. I only say that because I had the pleasure of being in Dorchester yesterday and doing some work with their principals. So it's what I love to do, be out in schools and districts working with educators just like them. I'm going to introduce them and then I'm going to turn it over to them to get started. Dr. Kenneth Wilson is currently in his fourth year as the Assistant Superintendent with Dorchester School District Two, bringing 35 years of dedicated service to education. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Math, a Master of Education in Administration, a Specialist in Education, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree. Throughout his career, Dr. Wilson has served in a wide range of roles across all levels of education, including elementary, middle, high school, math teacher, assistant headmaster, preschool, assistant principal, district testing coordinator. If there has been a role, Dr. Wilson has done it. So we are thrilled to have him here. Katie Barker currently serves as the assistant superintendent also in Dorchester School District 2, where she supports instructional leadership, curriculum implementation, and continuous improvement across schools. She brings experience as a former elementary principal, assistant principal, instructional coach, and special education teacher. Katie is passionate about helping school leaders turn classroom observations and student data into meaningful action through systems that support educators and students. So I'm thrilled to have you both here. For our participants, we're going to encourage you to participate in the chat, introduce yourself, ask questions as you'd like. And at that point, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you.
Well, good noonday, everyone.
Right.
It's good to be here with you. Katie and I are actually coming right out of an assistant principals training that we're facilitating today and tomorrow, two different groups. And so they are having lunch and we are here with you and happy to be here.
That's right. Thanks for having us.
All right, so where we began. So we started our journey with Classroom Mosaic initially back in 2017. As a matter of fact, I went back to look up when we actually started this, and our first meeting with them was on May 4th of 2017. And so it took us another year before we actually committed and actually signed on with the product itself. And so currently we use Classroom Mosaic for multiple things, including the walkthroughs, and we do that for our general education as well as our special education classes. We also use it for a school counselor walkthrough. We use it for our Read 180 and Math 180 classes, our literacy and math models, as well as our 4K. We also have coaching observations that are part of the platform, and we have professional learning community observations as well. And on top of those, we've also added evaluations for assistant principals, admin interns, district administrators, athletic directors, and classified staff. So we use the platform for multiple purposes. So to speak specifically about walkthroughs, prior to 2018, we did not have a system across our entire district to be able to look at walkthroughs and see what was happening across the district in every classroom. And so at that particular point in time, we were using paper pencil. And so individuals would do observations. I think we had a two-part form. You would tear it apart. You would give the teacher or whomever you were observing one copy of it, and you would keep a copy. Those copies went various places. We don't know where they all ended up at the very end of things, but we had no district way to look at observations and see how things were going in individual buildings and then how they were going across the district as a whole. And so because we didn't have that unified system, that is the reason why we moved towards Classroom Mosaic and the platform that's being offered, as it is customizable. And if you already have the product, you know that the company is very willing to customize based on your needs.
So, as Kenneth mentioned, we had a ton of data between PLC walkthroughs and observations in classrooms, but we weren't necessarily seeing a change in overall instructional practices. Our administrators were doing a great job completing walkthroughs, documenting them, and We thought we were giving teachers feedback, but we faced several challenges. For example, we have in our district have over the last several years kind of had an expected number of walkthroughs to make sure that all of our administrators were getting into classrooms. But because we had become a little compliance driven with that, we were doing a lot of documenting what we saw. So feedback was really broad. For example, objective was posted on board, things like that. But there wasn't anything that the teachers knew how to follow up on, knew what to do better. We were just documenting what we were seeing. So we had a lot of different information, and we just weren't being very intentional about where we were going with that. So we didn't see that practice change that we know we want to see following walkthroughs. So, Susan, thank you, perfect timing. So we knew we had to kind of shift our purpose. Once we felt really confident about our administrators and our instructional coaches, and our district leadership using the walkthrough tools, we knew we had to really shift our purpose from not just observing in class to focusing on instructional growth in classrooms. So we did a couple of things to shift that focus. One, we started using the feedback that we were getting to really look for those trends. So what was happening well within grade levels, within specific schools in their different content areas? Were we, for example, focusing well on stating and posting our standards and objectives? And that was something we could celebrate, but did we need to build up our questioning strategies? So really looking for those trends helped us to build out what some next steps would be. We also really focused on administrators, using those walkthroughs for coaching conversations, that it wasn't just about going in, completing your informal walkthrough, sharing feedback, but how do you build on that from a coaching perspective so that everybody in your building is getting feedback that they can build on. And then using that for our collective teacher learning is how are we using all of that we're learning from our walkthroughs and building professional development? How are our instructional coaches supporting some of those trends that we're seeing so that we can have a larger impact on teacher practice? And using Classroom Mosaic for that really helped us. As Kenneth said, we were using paper forms, so certainly no way we had the time or the energy to really compile all of that. So it helped us really shift that lens from looking just at what I saw to what we're all seeing, and most importantly, what we're going to do about it. So as we shifted that purpose, we really focused on what do we want to zoom in on? Where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck? And after some talk with district leadership, looking at best practices, we kind of started first with actionable feedback. So what are we doing during walkthroughs that a teacher walks away from that walkthrough after they see their feedback and they know exactly what to tweak, what to change, what to do differently, what to add, what to take away. And we were very intentional about making sure that the feedback was actionable. So one of the things that looked like for us was limiting the areas on our observation tool. So if we had 10 areas that you might observe or give feedback on, letting administrators and teachers know that we might really be focusing on only 2 or 3, so that way we can be very intentional and detailed in the feedback, but then also in the next steps or the actions that we want teachers to support with that. And it also let a teacher know that if this isn't just an area to focus on for you, what we saw to come to that decision, but also if it was an area of strength, what supporting evidence are we providing, so that you might score a teacher exemplary in motivating students, but if you didn't give some evidence about what the teacher did that was so strong, then the teacher doesn't know to continue that. So really providing evidence, and not just ratings, not just a score for how the teacher did during that time. Also, following up, we talked a little bit before about those coaching conversations. I always say that makes teachers a little bit nervous sometimes, that sitting needed with them and going over an observation, but there's so much power in that. For every teacher, even a strong observation. And as a principal, I always did my first walkthrough with every teacher all year. I wasn't going to share feedback until we sat across the table from one another and went over it together. So really empowering our administrators to have those coaching conversations with every teacher at least once where possible. And then going back and following up. So after they shared that actionable feedback, letting the teacher know something that they might want to try in the future, then following back up to observe again. So that we can see how we're doing in that area. So not just a try this and then I'll see you in 9 weeks, but really going back in the near future. And then talking with the teacher afterwards and allowing time for reflection. How did that feel? Did you see the difference? And what was the impact for that? And then last year, I just wanted to talk about we talk with administrators about when not to submit, and that is for those observations that we've all had them, unfortunately, where this is a conversation more than it is hit the submit button and let that teacher see that observation. That's still going to happen, but some of those ones where the teacher is struggling, there was an unclear focus, whatever it was in the classroom, and there's too much to address in simply an observation through the observation tool, and a conversation is warranted, then don't be afraid not to submit that walkthrough yet, and really just schedule that one-on-one time with the teacher, because that's an opportunity for us as leaders to really provide that support that a teacher is going to need in the classroom.
Before I move on to the next slide, just for those attendees that might not be familiar with the platform, when Katie and Kenneth talk about not submitting, as part of a walkthrough form, when that the observer submits the form, it automatically sends an email to that teacher, so they get some immediate feedback, and that teacher can respond directly to that, the email that they receive, or they're welcome to log into the platform. But that's what Katie's talking about, that the majority of the time, yes, we want that teacher to get something right away, so they're not worried about, what was that principal thinking? What was that leader thinking? The coach thinking when they were in my room? But there is a time and place, and Katie explained very well, when you might want to pause on that and talk to the teacher first. So thank you for sharing that example.
And sometimes there are just questions, even as an observer, that you're unclear about what was actually happening and what you were seeing. And so it gives you that opportunity to have that conversation with the teacher, get clarification before you actually submit your feedback to them electronically.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying. I guess I do assume everyone is knowing what that submit button is, but you're right. And this is something I'm going to now share just a few things that we've started recently to really take what we're doing in our current observations and walkthroughs at the school level and building on that, because we know that never ends, right? There's always more work to do. We always want to see our teachers growing, but also our leaders. And that's something that I feel like we have really started focusing on more of this year, is equipping our administrators and our instructional coaches with tools that to really focus on that they can use during a classroom observation. So we know that we are always better together. So a couple of things that we have started doing this year in order to really employ that practice is observing together. So Dr. Wilson mentioned that we are in the middle of a full day assistant principal training today. So one of the things that we have in Dorchester 2 is our assistant principals are all assigned to a specific cohort that is a focused area for professional development for them. And one of them focuses on instructional leadership. So our instructional leadership cohort this year is all working with a district level staff member, each assistant principal, and going in together. So going in as a pair to really and observe a teacher. And then, and again, going back to those things that we shared on the last slide, really focusing on 2 to 3 areas for each walkthrough so that they can be very intentional, very detailed in the feedback as well as the follow-up for a teacher. But then they're not stopping there. After they observe together and really debrief about what they saw, strengths, areas for refinement, then the assistant principal and the district staff member assigned to that cohort are meeting with that teacher to kind of go through strengths from the observation and to coach on one point. So one thing that they could do differently, maybe try something new. And then, as we said on the next thing, then they're going in the next couple of weeks to follow up and observe again together, so that way they're really focusing on the teacher growing instructionally, but also really empowering and building up our assistant principals with some of those feedback tools and resources, but also that coaching conversation that we know is so critical. So we've gotten some great feedback. We were a little bit nervous about how teachers would feel about that. But for the most part, we all know teachers show up in the classroom every day to do the very best work that they can do. So when we're able to give them strong feedback that they can act on, I think for most of them, that's very empowering. And most of them want them to come back again in the future. So that's exciting for us. Another way we're observing together this year, our gifted and talented coordinator in South Carolina, in our district, probably across the nation, one of the areas that we see the largest need for growth is with our high achieving students and challenging them at an appropriate level so that they are making growth and not just staying high achieving, but really growing as well. So our gifted and talent coordinator is visiting our schools and observing our gifted teachers along with our principals and really focusing on that depth and complexity piece. So that way they can really focus not just on the content, but giving feedback to that teacher that focuses on that depth and complexity that we know those gifted teachers need in order to really grow students in that area of high achievement. So we're excited about those. We're getting good feedback, but again, we know we still have work to do after that. So, but we are getting great feedback from those ways that we're observing together. And again, I think everyone grows from practices like that, where you're observing in paired groups like that.
And so as a result of that, we come to talk a little bit about celebrating success. Oftentimes in the education system, we can always point out those things that aren't quite working right, but we have to intentionally plan and find ways to celebrate. And so we had to learn how to do that intentionally. So that celebration might be simply based on the number of observations that may be taking place. It may be based on the scoring or the ratings that are coming out of those observations, or it simply may be improvements from the first observation that was done and now the third observation and the difference that happened there. So Classroom Mosaic has helped us with that, being able to aggregate the walkthrough data across our classrooms, even within the same grade level, same subject area, also within the same building, and then across buildings as well. And even elementary to middle to high, we've been able to see what the trends look like in each one of those separate areas. Also, it's allowed us to identify strengths and for those gaps, find ways that we can fill those gaps and look at trends over time. So now we are able to say what we see across the district versus what we see only in one classroom or in one particular school. So it could be that we're looking at class timing, whether or not observations are happening only at the beginning of class and nobody's going in the middle or towards the end of class. We can look at that data and see how it looks. We can look at the various domains. If it's the instructional domain, we can look at those in the indicators that are part of the SCTS 4 proto rubric. We can look at the learning environment, how things are going there. And then, as this slide is showing, the celebration of success, the digital learning environment, which we actually added onto our observation tool as a result of an accreditation visit. And with that visit, we were told that you have all these digital tools in place, but you're not actually using them for instructional purposes. And so as a result of that, we went back to our district strategic plan and we updated our plan, created a goal that's centered around the digital learning environment. And so as you can see, since we started back in 1819, moving forward to 25-26, we definitely see improvement in this particular area, which I think is also goes to prove the point that what gets monitored is what gets done. And because our staff members know that we are looking at the digital learning environment, they are being very intentional about that. So this definitely is an area for us to celebrate and continue to celebrate as we continue to move forward using Classroom Mosaic. So why does this approach work? Number one, feedback is clearer. And so it's interesting that we've been talking a lot about clear this week in the principals meeting. We talked about it. We're actually doing a book. We're doing Brené Brown's book study. And so to be clear is to be kind. So feedback allows things to be clearer, and it also allows you to be kind with what your feedback is. And sometimes that feedback might be positive feedback. Sometimes it may be feedback for improvement. It also allows us to be supportive and to be able to give the right support to our educators based on what they need. And then we don't have what we call those random walkthrough messages where things are just kind of inconsistent from various walkthroughs. So walkthroughs are very purposeful. Some of our administrators tell their staff members what the area of focus is for the walkthrough is happening. And then sometimes it's just a general walkthrough throughout. For our leaders have become more instructional minded as it relates to observation and are able to speak in academic vocabulary as conversations are being held. And then we have shared language that's shared across all of our schools. And then for our coaches, and I guess I should pause a minute to talk a little bit about our coaches. Our coaches, when they go in and observe teachers, we created a rule back at the very beginning that all coach feedback would be between the coach and the teacher. Our administrators don't see coach feedback. All they know is that a coach went in and did an observation, but they don't know specifically what that feedback is. We tried to maintain that trust, and we've been very successful with that since we started to let that be confidential between the teacher and the coach. And then also that has helped to guide intentional focus as it relates to professional development that our coaches will provide. To individual teachers, groups of teachers, and then when we plan PD across the district, we have great information to rely upon in doing that. So back to what Katie mentioned earlier, when we first started doing observations, it was more so about getting the count in, getting the score in. And so now we have moved from that to being to the place where we're really looking for improvement in coaching and growth. And that's really the focus and the why behind our observations currently. So as far as district impact at the district level, this has allowed us to have a clear instructional focus. We can have a district-wide focus in one particular area that comes from our observation instrument, and that's shared across the entire district. And it's allowed us, as I've already talked about, to have better planned PD and instructional initiatives because we have district-wide data that we can actually look at to see what's happening at various levels throughout our district. So we don't have to guess. And currently, what type of support that we need to provide, we can definitely see because the data speaks for itself.
This is the last thing I'm going to say. I'm going to be super fast because I know that we always take longer than we think we're going to, but just that we're excited. Our next step is we are adding the advanced AI a option in with Classroom Mosaic, and we sneak peeked it with our principals yesterday, and we're excited about how that will build on what we have talked about previously. They're able to kind of ask it, what is an area that this teacher needs coaching in, and things like that. So we're really excited about what that added feature will open up for our administrators coming soon.
Awesome. I'm going to launch a poll here for the folks as they're watching. But Susan, do you have any questions that you want to ask Kenneth and Kate?
Well, as I told Kenneth and Katie, I said, I feel like we could talk all day, every day. There's just so many good things that you all are doing, and we're really just happy to support the work. You heard in what Kenneth and Katie said, a lot of the customizing of things, I think is one of the great things that makes this sort of partnership work, that we can really help support the things that they do. Like Kenneth mentioned, the coaching being private. We have other districts who want coaching to be public, and that's okay. But making it fit the framework and the priorities that you have is what we always want to be there for. So we thank you so much for that. And I'm going to turn it back over to Ben to
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been just a wonderful partnership. And I think along the way, right, we have been able to learn from each other and support each other in this work. And that's really what we love to do is join people side by side and build the things that that they need. And so I guess one of the things that we're hearing from this poll, at least, is about running reports and trying to identify patterns to inform PD. And so you guys talked about that a little bit. Would you just maybe share an insight or two about how you use the data coming out of Classroom Mosaic to help inform professional development decisions?
He probably has more direct contact with this than I do. But when we receive well, we haven't, I will say this, we are still working with reports in Classroom Mosaic. So when we pull the reports, we can definitely look in the instruction domain or in the learning environment domain, and we can see the areas where we score high as well as the areas that we need to continue to work on. And then based on those results, we then implement plans and actions to address those specific things.
I agree. And I will say, I'll just give an example of how we see that working, is two of our domains that we observe for are problem solving and thinking. And because principals can pull scores for those areas from the dashboard, then they're able to know that those are areas that at the school level they need to focus professional development on, because those are the continually lowest scoring domains that teachers that administrators are seeing during walkthroughs. So that's just one example of how we're getting from that, looking at scores and feedback, to how are we building into professional learning and supporting teachers.
Awesome.